and welcome back to OTTB on Tap, episode 23. I'm Niamh.
And I'm Emily. Hey, Niamh, what's on tap today?
Today we're going to be taking a trip down memory lane and talking about some of the horses that we each bought and resold back when we were reselling OTTBs as a business. We know that some of our listeners are interested in things like pedigree and conformation, so we're going to be discussing those items as well. First up, Emily, I wanted to chat with you about a very special horse you had named Kiwi Gal. So how did you end up getting her?
Oh yeah, Kiwi Gal. She was really special. So I ended up getting her. She was still on the track and had developed a wind or a breathing issue while she was still racing. And so she recently had a wind surgery where I think they lasered off some scar tissue in her throat. And so she was recovering from that. I was just starting out on my own, and I was willing to take on the rest of her layup and care as the race owners decided to retire her from racing.
And so when you say you were willing to take on the recovery and layup from there, what did that entail exactly?
So she was on stall rest for at least another month after I got her, maybe a little bit longer. She had to remain quiet. She could be hand grazed, but no turnout, no riding. I never even got to see her move or trot or anything when I brought her home, and for the first long period of time, which is always interesting. But so she had to stay quiet in the stall, and then I had to take her to New Bolton to get scoped after a month or maybe a month and a half. And they cleared her. At that point, said her throat had healed from the surgery, and actually that she really had no limitations and she could go back into work at that point.
So since you didn't get to see her move or anything like that, what was it about her pedigree that really drew you to her?
So I really liked her name was Kiwi Gal. Her sire was Stormello, who was by Stormy Atlantic. And the dam was Mikey's Gal, who was by Montbrook by Buckaroo. And that is a line that I really like, the Montbrook, Buckaroo, Buckpasser. If you see that in a pedigree, it usually means that they are athletic, brave, and good jumpers. I believe the Montbrook usually makes me think that they'll also be a good mover. But if you just see the Buckaroo or Buckpasser, sometimes they're a little bit more of like that classic little bay, scrappy thoroughbred type. And then on top of the Stormello, who, in my opinion, seems to throw a lot of flashy chestnut horses that are nice movers as well. So I thought that was a good combination. And she was a really pretty dark chestnut. She had a big white face, like bigger than a blaze. It kind of wrapped around the whole side of her face, which I've seen in a lot of horses of that line too. And a couple of high weight stockings as well. So she was very flashy. I know there's a stigma against chestnut mares, but I tend to have a fondness for them. And she was definitely flashy. She was put together really well and had a really good pedigree and also came from good connections. So it seemed like, even though I couldn't really see her do anything, a good kind of risk to take.
And we'll put confirmation photos and pedigree of all of the horses that we're talking about today in the show notes and in photos on social media, so you guys will get to see that. She was quite a looker and just a very sweet mare. But let's talk about how you felt about her when you finally got to see her move.
I remember we turned her loose in the ring. And it was one of those moments of just like, oh, thank goodness I haven't put all this time and effort into something that moves like a jackhammer. She had a beautiful trot, a huge suspension, really a huge step behind, really used her hind leg very well. I just remember we took some pictures of her, and I think I posted one on Facebook, and I was like, well, I guess she was worth the wait. And definitely, that's how it felt. It's always good when you kind of unwrap that Christmas present after you've had it for a while, and it's everything that you hoped it would be, and she certainly was.
Yeah, definitely. And then what was she like to ride? So I do remember some of the first rides with her.
I think actually her first ride was pretty quiet. I think I had done a little bit of lunging and groundwork with her, and I got on her and I probably just walked and trotted around, and she was super good. I didn't ask her for very much, just to kind of go forward. And however, she was one of those horses that had an eternal go button. Like there was no need to install extra forward because she wanted to go all the time, whether you were walking or trotting. She wanted to go, 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 go. And not really in an obnoxious way, not in a way that bothered me. It's not like I was afraid she was going to run off with me or anything like that. I really enjoyed it. But I remember she did not like to stand at the mounting block or anywhere for me to get on her. So I remember you used to joke that I basically had to get on her at the trot.
Yeah. It's not
So
that uncommon.
yeah, she usually just pick up the trot right from the mounting block, and I'd be like half on,
Right. Away we
Good thing
go.
good thing I was young. I thought that was great.
Yeah. And for those that didn't know at this time, we didn't have a ring for a really long time in a lot of the different places where we tried to do this as a business. And so sometimes the parameters of getting on were and where you were riding definitely had a big influence on what was going to happen next.
Yeah. I think I first restarted her. We did have a ring, but
Yeah.
the property got sold and we had to move, and we were at an interim facility for a little while, and then we ended up at a fabulous farm that owners had just bought and had not installed the ring yet. So we definitely rode our OTTBs out in the wilderness quite a bit, and that just became the new normal.
Exactly. And so I think you have compared her in some ways to Alex. Can you talk a little bit about why she reminded you of Alex?
Yeah, I mean, they both just had that eternal go button. I think that she temperamentally probably was a bit more compliant and non-resistant to flat work than he was, or maybe I was just more tactful of a rider. She was very strong in the mouth, like him. Didn't really care what you were doing. She had an agenda and she was just going somewhere, and that was it. She was not spooky. She was so brave. The farm we were at the time also had a herd of cows, and they would rotate through different pastures and different areas of different pastures. So you never really knew when you were going to stumble upon a herd of cows. And sometimes horses are really afraid of cows, especially if they haven't encountered them before. And a lot of thoroughbreds have never seen a cow because they're raised in a pasture with other thoroughbreds, and then they go to the track and then they're retired, and it's like a whole new world, and cows were not a part of it. So I don't know exactly what it is about cows, but some horses are just irrationally terrified of them. And she was not. I actually have a really lovely picture, I'll have to dig it up, of me riding her in a pasture. And in the background, it's just all cows. So that was pretty cool. She also was super brave to jump. I don't think she ever stopped at anything at all. She was really scopy. She had great style. She was very, very cool.
I can remember we trailered off to a friend's farm not that far away. And I think that was the first time you'd really jumped over anything significant with a little bit of filler or that was like sort of solid. And
Yeah.
I think you just had the biggest grin on your face because it was everything you pointed her at. She was just eating up like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah, and not
cool.
in like that wild way that sometimes just like Alex was so brave, but it was like a hurricane going to the jump. She wasn't quite that way. I think she actually could have done pretty well in the hunters because
Yeah.
she did have a little bit more of a steady quality to her and a really nice big step and that super jump. Unfortunately, even though she'd had a successful wind surgery, she still made quite a pronounced roar or noise. So when she was breathing in, you would hear this. I'm trying to explain for people that don't know. It's like a roaring sound. And to show in the hunters, that would have been considered an unsoundness, even though it had been surgically corrected, but she still made that noise for whatever reason.
Right, because I feel like she could have made a fantastic derby horse. She had that great style with her knees to her nose, and she was so flashy.
Yeah, no, she was super cool. And we did get to do the starter horse trials at Plantation Field in the fall one year. And I think, true to form, I probably hadn't actually schooled her over real cross-country jumps because, I don't know, the opportunity probably hadn't presented to me, but she'd hacked out a lot, and we'd certainly jump logs and things. And we only did the little division, but she had no issue going through the water. And I think we even led a horse through the water. Yeah, like no issue at all with any of that. So I think she really had a lot of great potential in a couple of different disciplines.
Yeah. And then what ultimately ended up happening with her?
So, not to start the pod off on a sad note. But unfortunately, she ended up having some issues with gas colic. And we thought we had resolved it. And then it came back. We had the vet out to treat her and things, and couldn't quite pinpoint what was causing it. But then we thought we had her better. And I was driving out to the farm early one morning to check on her, and the farm owner called. And sadly, she had passed away in the field overnight, which was really sad.
Well, it's difficult, I think, when they're prone to gas colic because it can seem so mild. And I think the symptoms can be tough to understand how serious the issue is. And that recurrent colic can really take its toll.
Yeah, and I don't think that we had really had indication that it was as serious as it was.
Yeah.
Obviously. And I think that's really the tricky thing to do with colic. But it was definitely a tough way starting off trying to buy and retrain and resell horses. And you lose one really tragically like that, especially when, I mean, all horses, but she just had so much potential and so much charisma. You know, it's sad to think of what she could have attained in her career.
Yeah, I know. She's the one that I know that you still think of really fondly. And occasionally we'll see a horse and you'll be like, oh, that one kind of reminds me of Kiwi. And she was very sweet. She was very, very sweet.
Yes,
so
she really, really was. No, very,
way to suck
really
the
nice
air out
horse.
of the room, Emily.
I know. Sorry. Maybe we should have ended on her. I think I have more tales of tragedy coming, though.
Oh, okay. Super.
Horses. Yay. Anyway, let's lighten the mood and talk to Niamh about a horse that we had in our program a little bit later along, and his name was Floyd.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about him?
Yes. So we named him Floyd. His jockey club name is Bridge of Flowers. I had been working for Emily for a little while at this point, and she had tested the waters with me dealing with trainers on the track by having me do some text and or email communication with them to make sure I knew how to ask the right questions, how to limit how much time I was interacting with them, and also the art of negotiation of the sale. So Floyd was the first horse, I think, that you let me completely handle the process from start to finish. I had maybe shown you a picture of him and you were like, he looks great. He was at Finger Lakes Finest, which is a 501c3 based in Western New York. If you're ever looking for a horse, they have fantastic listings. They do a lot to help connect buyers and trainers, get these horses into second homes. And you can do pre-purchases through the track there, but it's a tough track to get to. So you have to be pretty comfortable buying sight unseen unless you live anywhere in that area. So I called up the trainer, asked all the right questions, asked about injuries, wind issues, vices, negotiated a price. I just looked at the bill of sale. I think I paid like $1,012.50 or something for him, which you can't find those prices anymore. No. I know. I don't know why it ended up being that price.
Maybe that was like the transaction fee or something.
Oh, maybe so I made the offer, told Emily I bought him. She's like, okay, great. Now you have to send him the money. This is before Venmo and PayPal was around, but people weren't really using it. No.
Yeah, trainers didn't often have PayPal. So you had to find very creative ways to get money to trainers in random locations.
Yeah. So in this case, I was working downtown in Philly and I found a Western Union that also happened to be a jewelry and watch shop. And I had to go in and explain to the shop owners that I was sending money to a horse trainer in upstate New York, which I don't know what they thought about that whole thing. And of course, I'm just wiring money to somebody, hoping the horse gets on a trailer and finds its way down to us. And he did. And he was gorgeous. I mean, there's so much to like about the way that he looks. I'm actually looking at his confirmation picture right now. I think in terms of resale projects, he's about as nice as they come. He was a nice mover when I watched his jog. He's put together really nicely. He's fairly short coupled and just an overall nice, pleasant horse to look at. Dark bay
with white.
Yeah, dark bay with a big white star and a white sock. And really, really nice breeding. He is by War Chant, who is by Danzig. And then his bottom line is Frostflower, who's by Sadler's Wells. And Now I think finding Sadler's Wells horses is like catnip for resellers, but to find the Sadler's Wells and Danzig means you're going to have a pretty nice moving horse with a lot of trainability there.
What other line do you see in that pedigree that I like?
Oh, Chris S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris S. and Roberto are typically can be a little tough, but typically exceptionally brave and great jumpers and
good
really
athletes.
Athletic.
Yeah.
So great combination there.
Yeah, really, really nice combination. And quite frankly, I haven't seen a combination quite like that in a long time. But the funny part about the whole experience was that we get him home and we're all excited about him. And at the time, we had a barn full of 3-year-olds. So I was all excited about this 4-year-old horse that I bought. I think it was in the fall. And Emily looks him up and she goes, "He's 3." And I was like, no, he's 4. I'm sure of it. And no, he was 3, and I had just not done the math right. Math is definitely not my strong suit. And so now we had another 3-year-old in the barn. But overall, the whole experience of buying him sight unseen by myself was really good. And I don't think Emily was too upset when she saw him actually move.
Yeah. And the reason being that I think that buyers are opening up a little bit more to a 3-year-old, especially in the fall, because it'll be 4 in a couple of months. But for a long time, it was really hard to get buyers to look at 3-year-olds or, God forbid, a 2-year-old, because a lot of buyers want that. I mean, this is my hypothesis. They want that more instant gratification that they can put a little training on the horse and take it to a show right away. And there aren't too many shows, or at 3 you're still kind of like probably shouldn't be jumping it too much. You have to be a little bit more careful with them because they're still growing. But once they hit 4, everybody wants them. So that was the reason specifically we were looking for something 4 years old. But yeah, as soon as he got off the trailer, all of that just went by the wayside.
Right. Your student had finally arrived.
What did you think when he stepped off the trailer?
I mean, I just liked him on site. He was as nice as he looked on the Finger Lakes website, and, a nice personality, and looked athletic. He was an interesting one because even though I think he was on the taller side, I want to say he was 16 too. And normally we would have Emily riding the taller horses and I would ride the smaller horses depending on their temperament, because Emily is quite tall and I'm pretty average. But for whatever reason, Floyd loved me. So
yeah, he did not like me.
It was really strange because I am not nearly as tactful as a rider as Emily. I don't ride as light as she does. I don't know what it was. Maybe I was like one of his exercise riders. Who knows? But I remember riding him for a sales video and just being like, oh my God, this horse was born on the bit. He had so much push from behind and was just so agreeable. I think at the time I wasn't looking for another horse, but I would have kept him in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So is he one of the ones that got away for you?
Maybe. I mean, I think probably I would have arrived at the same thing that I always arrive at, which is this horse is too big for me. I imagine he probably ended up growing a little bit more as time went on. So, but he didn't last long though in our program. I think he was just the right type and came into the program at just the right time to go on pretty quickly. So,
and what other kind of big step did you have in your time with me while we had him? What kind of growth step?
Oh, you mean riding and a vetting?
Yeah.
So the day that he got vetted was so cold, so cold and so windy. I want to say it was like 20 degrees. The wind was whipping and we were just really kind of hoping like maybe this will be really straightforward and we can just put him in the round pen, let him go loose. And nope. The vet wanted every single thing done. And so she starts off with just normal stuff and then goes into, let's see him on the lunge line. And Emily puts him on the lunge line and it's like flying a kite. He's just whipping around. The tail's flagged. We had a huge ring at the time. It was like a Grand Prix size ring. And so you didn't have like a lot of parameters in there. And because he went so well for me, I was going to ride him in the vetting, and she walks over to me and says, "Time to put your big girl pants on." And I got on him, and yes, he was really, really puffed up at this point, but he went beautifully for me. She actually at one point had me galloping him around the ring to get his heart rate up for the vetting, which is pretty typical. But on this particular day, I was like, "You want me to do what?" And I was like, okay. But he was so good. And it was a big step for me to know that you're the one presenting this horse to the vet. You want the horse to look as uncomplicated as possible and just show off everything that's great about the horse to the best of your ability and let the horse speak for itself. That whole experience of that particular horse from start to finish was a big monumental moment in my working student experience. So.
And you did a great job. No, it was very cool. I remember when you showed me his ad, and I think I was driving, or I don't know. I was certainly not paying full attention. And I was like, well, you know the questions, like, handle it.
I was like, oh, okay. It's time for me to shine. Let's go.
Yeah, and you did. No, it was great. One thing I want to add to something I just love so much about thoroughbreds is that while they can act goofy when they're loose or under, on the lunge line or whatever, when it's a cold and windy day, usually they cut all of that nonsense out as soon as you get on them. And that's something that I think over the years I've learned to really value about them as a breed, and just I think from all of their early experience with being ridden in all sorts of conditions every single day.
You really can almost count on it.
Yeah, usually.
Which is nice. Yeah, usually. All right, well, let's switch gears and let's talk about another horse that you had at the same time period as Kiwi. Her name was Victory Money. So let's talk about how and why you acquired her.
Yes. So another sob story here. My early work as a OTTB buyer and retrainer and reseller was a little torturous. I had applied for and been selected as a trainer for the original RRP, or as it was called then, the RRTP makeover event, which was to be held at the Pimlico racetrack in Baltimore. And so this was back in 2013, I believe. The format was different back then than the current makeover that we've been talking about on this show. And we'll talk through my experience there with this horse in an upcoming episode. But anyway, I'd been selected, and I had very recently bought a really lovely colt that I figured would make a great makeover horse. And then unfortunately, I had him castrated, and the surgery had some complications, and I ended up having to euthanize him tragically.
Yeah, I remember that. Actually, I remember you calling me on the train. I was on my train to Philly, and you were explaining what happened. And, there is a real benefit of buying from resellers that have already gone through a lot of this process for you. Having something go catastrophically wrong with a castration is not super common, but it is an outcome, and it can be quick and life-threatening. And I remember how you had such high hopes for that horse, and he was absolutely gorgeous. So that was a devastating loss. And so now you're like, well, how do I recover from that? And how am I going to find a horse? And you're also in it for however much money you had paid at this point too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was really on a budget, and that definitely played a factor. I think probably being selected for the makeover kind of helped keep me going, probably, because it was like, all right, well, what are you going to do? You need to get another horse, because I think I had Kiwi at this point, but she was still on stall rest. I had no idea what her recovery was going to look like. I had never seen her move. So I'm pretty sure I borrowed some money from my brother maybe to buy a different horse for the makeover. And I think it was in September back then. So I had several months still left, because this was maybe April or May. But the timeline was pretty short to get an off-track thoroughbred, retrain it, and then show it off on a racetrack in front of a crowd in a few months. So it needed to be a special horse. And I saw an ad on good old Facebook for a bright bay horse with a blaze and some socks, which is basically my siren call, if you know me. And this horse was located down in South Jersey, and I went to see her. I think I didn't know that it was a mare originally, but she had such a petite, very mare-like face. It was pretty obvious. But if I recall correctly, there was basically a kid riding her around in this ring, and she just had this crazy good attitude and one of the best canters that I'd ever seen. The only way I could really describe it was like a clock. Like you just set it and forget it. It was super uphill, super balanced. She was so balanced and had such a good attitude that I decided to bring her home. I also wanted to add a fun fact here of how she got her barn name.
Yes.
I am terrible at naming things. I take forever. I don't know why. It seems like a huge decision. So at the time, and still to this day, we really liked going to a local to Pennsylvania brew pub called Victory Brewing. And the mare's name was Victory Money. And me, in my enterprising ways, I'm always looking for some way to have an angle. I really liked a beer that they had called Prima Pils. It's kind of one of my go-tos. I still like it. It's great crisp beer on a hot summer day. And with the similarity in their names, I decided to name her Prima, which also fit her because she really was a little bit of a prima donna, but in the best way. And she was so gorgeous, and she knew it. Yeah. And she was kind of dainty, but also kind of tough. So that name fit her perfectly.
Perfectly, yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about her pedigree. What were some notable horses in there?
Sure. So Victory Money, or Prima, she was by a stallion called Love of Money. And he was by Not for Love, which is just a really lovely line, local kind of to the Mid-Atlantic region usually. And they're just known to be very dependable, good looking, solid, nice moving. It always gives me like comfort to see Not for Love in a pedigree.
Yeah.
And then on the bottom line, a notable name is Fapiano. And I think whenever I see Fapiano in a pedigree, I know or assume that horse is going to have really good movement. And that certainly held true throughout my time with her. But there's a lot of other good names in there too, but those two really, really stand out to me and made me think she'd have a great temperament, be athletic, be a very nice mover, and reasonable overall.
Yeah, and I don't think you see as many Not for Loves as much anymore, but I know Jessica Redmond for the longest time just raved about them as well.
Yeah.
You don't see as many of them as we used to back when we were doing this, but yeah, they're highly sought after.
It would certainly be much further back. I think he was a 1990 stallion, so it would be further back in pedigrees. And I believe Love of Money is no longer with us as well, so had kind of a limited line of progeny.
Yeah.
But she sure got all the good qualities from all of those horses.
And then let's talk a little bit about what she was like to bring along. I think, if I remember correctly, your parameters for the first year of the RRTP were, did you only have 60 days or 90 days that you were allowed to train within?
I don't think it was that strict, but it was just a very compressed time period because the date, I'll have to look up and we can put in the episode notes, like the date that the trainers were announced and then the date of the actual event. But
and we can go into that more in like another episode when we actually just talk about that.
When we do the Prima full-on episode for the RRP. But I think it was about 3 months of training time that we really had overall. So she was put together really well. We'll definitely include a conformation photo and show how that related to her movement and her jump. I think I actually wrote an article for the RRP about that. So I'll see if I can find that and put a link in there. Beautiful shoulder, nice high setback wither, really elegant neck, and a very strong and kind of sharply angled hind end, which I think has gone a little bit out of favor, but makes me think that they'll be good movers and good jumpers and have a lot of power in their hind end. And she just had the greatest attitude. I mean, she was a mare, and so you still had to ask her rather than tell her. But she was brave. Like I said, that canter of hers was like nothing I'd ever ridden. She had a natural, just flawless built-in flying change.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes later in her career, she'd like to throw those in for fun when
For
she
fun,
wasn't supposed to. But she was very, very cool. Just drop dead gorgeous mare.
You didn't show her or anything like that, is that correct?
I did, actually. In the lead up to the RRP, we did at least one. I think we did 2 or maybe 3 starter horse trials. Okay. And then I did do a beginner novice event with her at Plantation afterward. We did lots of hacking and paper chases. One fond memory I have is, I don't think we had a trailer at the time, and you and I wanted to do a local paper chase. So you drove your car over with a cooler with sandwiches and maybe a couple of refreshments for afterwards. And I rode her down the road to the paper chase and ponied your horse. I think that's the paper chase he ran away with you in. Too. But
yeah, that was a good memory though, because we were there with our 2 horses and no trailer in sight.
Right, like a couple lawn chairs and a cooler, and we're just sitting there with our horses grazing as we're waiting to go for the paper chase. But yeah, she was super fun, all-around horse that you could really do that with, but also she was fancy and talented enough to excel in really any discipline.
I did ride her quite a bit, and I do remember one time specifically when she was really, really confirmed in her flat work, and her canter was, as Emily said, so incredible, but you would shift your seat even a tiny bit and she'd just say, oh, swap leads. Okay. And she'd be doing tempi changes with you just, you're like, oh, I'm just trying to sit still. Oh God. She felt so much more trained than, just that natural balance really shines through. And it's very cool when you have a horse like that almost feels like it came pre-installed with buttons. And I know that this was a time in your business where you were starting to get your footing, you were getting some really nice horses offered to you. We were finding great horses. And ultimately, I think that some hard decisions had to be made, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, she is one that I would have loved to have kept for myself, for sure. But yeah, when you're doing this as a business, it's like, guess what? You have to sell the ones that you like because everybody else likes them too. And that's tough. That's really tough. I feel like I still had aspirations to maybe go and compete back at the upper levels. So that was always on my mind too. But when your hay bill comes in or your feed bill and you need to pay it, you have to make tough decisions. So I think she was always kind of on the market, but I wasn't pushing her. But then eventually I realized that, she was a really nice horse and I needed to buy a truck and I should sell her. Niamh, do you want to tell them about what we had to go through in order to show her to people?
Well, so we were renting this very cute little farm in the Kennett Square, Unionville area of PA. It had everything that we needed except for a ring. So it had a round pen, an equisizer that the horses could walk, trot, canter on, beautiful pastures, a really nice barn. It was easy to work in and out of for the both of us. We were both driving over an hour to get there to do just the regular chores and everything like that. But when we needed to show a horse to a client, we would have to hack to a local indoor. Now, if you're driving, you can get to this indoor in about 30 seconds from where the farm is, but that's not a safe place to ride horses. So we would have to hack them about 2.5 miles to get to this indoor. And then you also had to cross a 4-way stop where you would often be met by like 18-wheelers or motorcycles, or for the most part, people were pretty horse savvy in that area, but you never know if you've got some weekend warriors out there just careening around. So it's certainly not for the faint of heart. And it's also really difficult when you're trying to show a horse to a client for the first time. You don't know anything about their riding ability or anything like that. So I believe we met the clients in our barn and let them kind of look at some of the horses Emily had for sale. And then when they decided that they wanted to ride Prima, Emily and I rode my horse Riley, and Emily rode Prima over to the other farm, and they met us over there.
It must be funny to show up to see a horse and the client hears you say, well, you're going to have to drive to get to where I'm going to show you the horse.
Right.
And they're probably expecting you to put the horse on a trailer, but no, you just get on and go trotting down the road.
Right. We're like, we'll be there in like 15, 20 minutes.
On the other hand, I mean, it's a great way to show their abilities and what they can do. You can't fudge that. You can't sugarcoat that. You have to get from point A to point B. So that horse better be pretty broke. And we had to go down some back roads, and there was a lot of obstacles like you were describing.
Yeah. And I think when our client came to try her, there was a little bit of chaos going on in the indoor arena that we were lucky enough to use.
Oh,
which I just remembered.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So I rode her in the exchange of me getting off of her after doing her walk, trot, canter, jump a couple jumps, and the client getting on her. This is a wonderful local indoor that the owner is so kind and allows people in the community to come over and use it. And a local trainer came at that moment with, I don't know, 6 horses and students, and they just came in the ring and started jumping everything and created definitely a little bit of chaos, but again, showed the horse's ability to deal with really different circumstances that you might encounter that in real life at a show or wherever. So
yeah, and I think the rider at the time had some confidence issues as well, and so I think it really boosted her feelings about the horse, because I think at one point she got really buzzed up behind, and Prima was like, okay, and that was very cool. And then on the way back to the farm, so we could discuss how they felt about the horse, I was like, why don't you just ride her back with me? So I'm taking the client now back on this crazy journey back to the farm. Emily was with the mother. And I just want to say really quickly, we had no idea by completing this transaction with these two that they would become lifelong friends of ours. But Jenny and her mom, Karen, they've been repeat customers of ours, and they are near and dear to our heart. They feel a little bit like family in some ways to me. And they're just two wonderful individuals that we just couldn't be happier to have sold a horse to. So
yeah, and she's still with them. They love her. She wants for nothing. They keep telling me to come down and ride her, so maybe I should do that at some point.
Well, in testimony to her great attitude, they just pull her out of the field and she can go fox hunting.
Right.
It's pretty amazing. So
yeah, pretty amazing. Definitely a past favorite horse of mine.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and it's always really cool to go down there and see her and pet her big blazed pink nose. And it's just amazing to have people that have the opportunity to keep them for as long as they need to. And it's very cool. So
yeah, it's the type of home that you just absolutely love to sell a horse to.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our final OTTB of Christmas past for today's episode. Niamh, let's talk about Double No.
So this is another first time working student experience for me. There's multiple ways that you can buy horses off the track. You can buy them sight unseen from different tracks, like I just spoke about. You can go to the trainer on the backside. There's Facebook, obviously, Craigslist, if you're willing to roll the dice. And so this was going to be my first experience actually going on the backside with the specific intention of buying a horse. At this point, I had visited several backsides around our area where there's a lot of tracks near us. So within an hour or 2 hours, you can visit quite a few tracks. So I had an idea of what it was like to go into the office, get the day pass or whatever, and all of the red tape you have to jump through to actually be allowed on the backside. You can't just walk on there, and you certainly can't drive in with a trailer and just show up. But this happened to be a trainer that Emily had previously worked with. She breeds a lot of her own horses and just has always had just spectacular sales horses. And they're not inexpensive because she knows what she's got. And this horse was no exception. So we had gone there to look at 2 horses, and Emily thought this particular horse might be a good one for me because he was on the smaller side at the time. He was 15.2 and I think he's 15.3 now. But so we get there and I go up to the stall and I was like, oh my God, is that him? because he has the cutest face you've ever seen. He's a bright bay. He's got 2 hind white stockings, and then he's got this star stripe half of his face, and then the whole bottom half is a blaze. Just so adorable.
We could have just written the check then and left because you were definitely getting this horse.
He was just so cute. So we asked her about him. I think he raced 9 times. He was not very competitive on the track. He was a homebred by her. I do have baby photos of him, which were really cute. And she had been using him to pony a little bit at the track, but because he was so small, and she had this incredible pony horse who was this enormous Palomino named Pitchfork. And she's like, I can't really replace Pitchfork with this little thing. So she took him out of the stall. She jogged him for us, and he was spectacular. And Emily kind of elbowed me and said, don't negotiate.
Which sounds crazy, but I mean, the way he trotted was jaw-dropping, especially in such a little package. He moved like a really big, really fancy, almost like a warm blood. And yeah, I mean, I thought his price was a little high for what Niamh really probably wanted to spend, but he was exactly what she was looking for. And I thought for the quality, the fact that we knew everything about his background, that just pay the price. It's a fair price.
Yeah, I think back then, if you translated the price into what you would pay now for a horse off the track, he would have seemed incredibly expensive, especially for a small horse. But I'm looking right now at his listing photo that she sent us, and he's conformationally sort of unique. He has an extremely impressive shoulder and hind end, and he's very short coupled, but I think for a lot of people, they wouldn't have a great imagination for how this horse is going to move and jump. And like Emily said, he has a lot of what I think Jimmy used to call it bounce per ounce, where for as little as this horse was, he just sort of floated off the air. And in his new career, that's incredibly true. But he was by Discreetly Mine, who was a graded stakes winner, by Mine Shaft, who's by AP&D. So really fantastic breeding there. Discreetly Mines are a very, very strong stamp. Everyone that I've seen looks very similar to him. And then the bottom line is primarily Stormcat. So I wasn't put off by that whatsoever. I'd heard good things about Tail of the Fox, who was his dam, and who's by Tail of the Cat. Wasn't particularly worried about it, but they can be incredibly athletic, opinionated, strong-willed. And I don't necessarily think of stereotypes as always being a negative thing. So sometimes people really like that type, that cattier type of horse. So
yeah, and another name that I love to see in a pedigree of Discreetly Mine, the sire. His dam sire is Private Account, which is an old name, but one that I always love to see. Again, it gives me that feeling of them it gives a little bit of a steadiness to the pedigree, I usually find, and that along with the AP&D can balance out the fieriness of the Stormcat oftentimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, in my opinion, that I think some of the Stormcats are incredibly hard knocking. They can kind of take a licking and keep going. So you want a horse like that if you're going to find an event horse or something like that.
What's a fun fact about Stormcat that we know? Pop quiz.
A fun fact about Stormcat.
Where was he born?
Oh, he was born on the farm that we used to rent.
Yeah.
So was Danzig.
Yeah.
The farm where we were just talking about with no ring and the cows was an old breeding facility where some of the most notable horses of all time were bred. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It has a ring now. Beautiful farm.
Yes, that's gorgeous.
At the time, it did not. So anyway, moving on.
So we brought him home. He was really high on life when we brought him home. He was eating an enormous amount of grain. He apparently wasn't really fond on eating hay. And so I knew the transition from track life to riding horse life was going to be a little bit slower than some horses. He also hadn't really been doing much. He hadn't been doing workouts or anything like that. I'd been doing a little bit of ponying. So he just needed time to chill out, get his muscles all relaxed. I mean, when I post the conformation photo, the listing photo, you can tell he's like a coiled spring. But he was what I describe as being pretty sharp. He was a horse that made me slow down a lot and break things down really intentionally for the couple of months that I let him let down. So I did a fair amount of groundwork with him and desensitization to just get him just to take a breath. He certainly seemed like a horse that really wanted to work and do something. So I think that can be really hard when you just want to put them out in a field and say, okay, you get to just like chill out for a couple of months.
I think I recall the trainer telling you, I think you or I were asking her what he was like to ride. And I think, if I recall correctly, there was something about getting on him, but she told you just sit chilly and he'll work it out.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of an educational like moment for you. And you learned to do that with him, where that expression is something I feel you can't really define what sit chilly means. But once you learn how to do it, you kind of get it.
Yeah.
Something I feel like I need to relearn how to do in my 40s.
Now with your young horse. Yeah. No, it's hard. To me, I always equate it with maybe not putting both feet in the stirrups and making yourself feel very sort of like a lump. Like you're going to sit there and be ready for however the horse is going to move. And you're going to allow them to figure it out for a couple of strides or whatever. I do remember the first time I ever tried to get on him, he completely panicked at the mounting block. And then I was like, okay, it's time to break this down into smaller pieces for him so he understands. Yes, I probably could have gotten on him from the ground, but that's not fair for him. So yeah, then I basically turned him out for a couple of months, but I worked with him every day and then started to put first couple rides on him. And this was really when your program was starting to take off. We had, I don't know, 20 horses at least in the barn.
Yeah, we had a lot.
And it was just the two of us doing this. We did have somebody that would almost always muck the stalls.
Unless we had an early vetting and we'd show up and the barn hadn't been mucked. That was always super fun. We also were working with a rescue too. So the rescue would send us horses that may or may not be off-track thoroughbreds. Maybe they're off-track standardbreds. Maybe they're
feral ponies,
rodeo horses. Yeah. So we had that going on as well. So there was a lot going on at this time.
And like I said in a previous episode, that sometimes your personal horse takes a little bit of a backseat, but I worked with him and knew he had a lot of potential, just a basic walk, trot, canter, taught him about connection, and very quickly realized that that horse had an enormous amount of potential. I don't know what it's like to ride a horse at the upper levels, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what kind of potential a horse might have and what that might feel like underneath of you. And I felt that a couple of times with horses that have come through our program. And he was definitely one of them. When I describe him to people, I'm like, he's the kind of horse that would work 9 days a week if you wanted to. He wasn't really meant to be a horse that you just rode 2 or 3 days a week. And he didn't enjoy that for sure. But he showed a lot of promise over fences. He was brave. And he was a little unorthodox about his way of going, even now at the upper levels. But we decided that it would make sense for me to sell him. And I think around this time I had started riding Scout.
He was tough for you to the right as well. I remember working on his right lead, which is your difficult side, and which was something that we struggled with Riley as well. And I think when you rode Scout, you didn't have those issues, even though he was a much larger horse. So it sort of was like at that same point. And you don't always know when you get one off the track what they're going to be like. And are they one-sided? Are they going to mesh with me? Even though on paper he was small and cute as a button and on paper was everything you wanted.
Yeah, but it's a different thing when you start riding them. And also his trainer was like, oh, he's so quiet and he's this and he's that. And I'm like, he's not really that quiet. And he never did anything particularly naughty, but you just knew this horse had a ton of potential. So we didn't really advertise him, but I did know of some people that were looking There was a trainer that I knew from South Jersey. She had some really good students that were about to kind of branch out on their own and go do some working student jobs. And a few of them came to try him, but the girl that he liked the most, Kirsten Shutima, bought him from me. She got on him, rode him around, jumped over a bunch of logs and things. I still get a little Facebook memory of that. And I think she really liked him. I think at that point she had gone novice with another horse that was experienced or semi-experienced. So her taking this little horse along meant that she was going to be doing everything for the first time with him. And it's been incredible to see what this little horse has been doing with Kirsten. She has taken him up through the 3-star level. They've competed, I think, 5 or 6 3-stars. They've had a ton of top finishes in the intermediate level. He still jumps a little unorthodox, but he clears everything by a mile, and he just looks brave as a lion out in cross country. I know he's pretty difficult to ride on the flat, and she's just finessed such beautiful work out of him. And I get to run into them every once in a while at a show, and it's just really cool to see all of the stuff that they've done. Like I said, it was all of their first together. So it's so commendable to see a young rider that has taken this little horse and brought him up through the level so successfully. And we're hoping to have a full episode with Kirsten soon to talk about her journey and her stable of horses that she has right now. She's branched off on her own.
She's local, so we could always go see her for a little bonus video content.
Ooh,
maybe.
Yeah, that would be fun. Meet her barn full of horses. That would be really cool. Yeah, so look forward to an episode about him. He actually goes by a completely different name. So his jockey club name was Double No, and I named him Nolan. And when she bought him, she renamed him One Sly Fox, which is such a perfect name for him. And his barn name is Tango, which is just so adorable. So yeah, look for them out competing in Area 2. And I think they just competed at Fair Hill over the weekend. So yeah, they're out and about now, and look for a full episode with her soon.
Great. Well, we hope you all enjoyed our little trip down memory lane today. We'll be posting pedigrees, pictures, videos, and more on our website to go along with this episode. So please check it out.
If you liked what you heard today, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can find OTTB on tap on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Feel free to reach out to us with interview candidates and topic suggestions on our website, OTTBontap.com. Sign up for our newsletter to be the first to find out about upcoming episodes, bonus content, and much more. Don't forget to follow along our Retired Racehorse Project Trainer Chronicle series. So far, we've posted our first interviews with Annika and Lauren. Julianne and Chelsea's episode will be airing soon. You can find more info about them on our website. We love hearing from you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.